one of the things that we're trying to do this year is do more video. Dr. Brad Harrop, of course, did one a couple weeks ago on transgenderism. I know he plans on doing some more of those things here in the weeks to come as well. We're going to be doing a lot more short video, things like that kind of get Christian content out there. And one of these that I'm really passionate about, I'm excited about, is the book of Revelation. And so that's what I want to get into. It's not going to be a in-depth verse by verse. If that's what you're interested in, Focus Plus is where you want to go. That's focuspress.org/plus. It's our supporters kind of exclusive area, subscribers, where for a few bucks a month, you get our Revelation class we did. We took a year on it, 45-minute classes at a time. And so I'm not going to be able to do that week at a time here on Facebook. I'm going to kind of hit the high points. And so that's part of the plans here is the book of Revelation. I'm going to be doing other Bible books, things like that throughout the time here that I do these on Facebook, hopefully Thursday night. And so, yeah, I'm just trying it for this first one to talk about the book of Revelation. It's really important to me that we get this one right. It's really important that we talk about Revelation. In fact, I have to confess, early in my preaching years, I very much shied away from the book of Revelation. I thought, it doesn't really matter, getting caught up in the minutia, getting caught up in the little details, and is it really that big of a deal? And it is that big of a deal. It's something that there's really important messages to be taken from the book of Revelation. And when we miss them, there's a lot of ways they go wrong. I'm going to talk about that at the end of this stream here as we talk about what Revelation looks like. And so I've got my slides pulled up. I was testing this earlier. It looked like the slides were coming through pretty readable, pretty good size. I have never used this software to stream before, so I hope that works. But when we talk about Revelation, one of the things that's really important to understand is when it happened or when it was written, talking about what time period is it still yet to come? And so we're going to talk about those kinds of things because it leads to how you read the news today. There's a lot of people that every time something pops off in the Middle East or there's somebody drops a bomb somewhere, this is just like the book of Revelation. Number one, it's not the book of Revelation. If you didn't know that before, I'll give you the one strike, but from now on, it's the book of Revelation. And so that's an important thing that we get that right. But also, is it really about modern day news stories? I'm going to show my hand a little bit and say, no, it's not. But along with the looking forward to end times and things like that, there's also ways to interpret it wrong with what it has to do with our engagement with the world around us, with the nature of the church and how it fits in the world, and whether or not what we're supposed to expect, I guess, from the church's engagement from the world, and kind of the forever underdog view of the church and how all that works. Well, that doesn't really fit with Revelation either. And so we're going to get to the important matters of interpretation toward the end of our stream here. So let's just start off with the interpretive differences. I hinted at a couple of these there. So there is the futurist, which is to say that the things that happen in the book of Revelation are still yet to come, that mostly it's looking ahead to events that we have yet to experience. And so it takes things a little more literally when it talks about the stars falling and the moon turning to blood and some of those very, scary images that you see in the book of Revelation. It's looking at those saying, yeah, one of these days that's going to happen. And these things that are maybe over in the Middle East, again, Jerusalem is at the heart of so many things. That's what Revelation is really about. And so we can use it almost as a roadmap of what's to come. And I think you actually can use it as some kind of a roadmap, but not in the sense that they think. There's the historicist view, which is to say that John was writing about, all right, here's some things that are going to happen over the next few hundred years, and we can look at it and line it up with history and say, okay, this was about, essentially, that the book was about the Empire of Rome, about Roman persecution on the church that was going to occur over the next couple of hundred years, and kind of that clash that was going to be there between the church and the empire. And so it would look back and say, historically, that's what the book of Revelation is about. And that's what leads to some of that interpretation of the church as kind of the perpetual underdog, is it's us against the world kind of thing. And so, again, these things all very much intertwine with when you read it from, what you think it's talking about, and how you apply it today. Then you have the preterist view, which is to say that it happened very early, like right after John wrote, that it was about the fall, that really almost everything in the book of Revelation, well, you see it says partial preterist and full preterist. Partial says just about everything in the book of Revelation has already happened. except for Jesus returning at the very end, and that it happened very early, 70 AD, as a matter of fact, at the destruction of Jerusalem. And then full preterism says it's all happened. Jesus isn't actually returning, and there's not going to be a final judgment, that God just lets it. We're not going to get into that. I'm not a proponent of that at all. I think there's a lot of error in it. I think you can probably see the error in it with where it's going. So I'm not going to spend any time on full preterism. And then there's the idealist view, to say that the book of Revelation is not really about any particular time period. It's not about any particular people. The general struggle of good versus evil throughout history and the life of the church in the last 2,000 years, and that it's just kind of giving us what's going to happen with God's plan in history. And again, not tied to any specific events or people, but just Satan and the church and Christ overseeing it all. And again, good versus evil, sin versus light, and all of those things. And so the idealist view. And again, I think there's a little bit of validity to that, but the book is far too specific, I believe, as we're going to get into in the few weeks that we take this study. So as I might have said, partial preterist is my view of it, and we're going to talk about why in this stream. One of the things that the other parts of the interpretation or interpretive differences goes to Revelation 20, verses 1 through 10, and that's where we have the reference to the millennium. And this is what has caused so many disagreements, so much content, the Left Behind series and John Hagee and the people that are trying to look at the read the roadmap to the end of time, the blood moons and eclipses and solar eclipses, lunar eclipses, all those things. They look at that millennium as it's coming any day now. That there's so they're the dispensational premillennialism, which is to say we are in the dispensation of the church. There is a dispensation coming in which Christ is reunited with the Jewish people, that he reestablishes the kingdom in Jerusalem, and in part of that you're going to have rapture, where the faithful are taken out of this world, and the tribulation is going to come, the punishment that's going to come on those that weren't faithful, and kind of a chance, I believe, to repent and get back to him before that glorious 1,000-year reign that's still coming. And then there was a historical premillennial view, which actually a lot of the early church believed, which is quite a bit different, but it's very uncommon to see that held today. There is a rapture and a tribulation, but it's not the same with the Jewish dispensation and the rule from Jerusalem and all of those things. And then there is the amillennial view, which is to say that there's not a real literal 1,000 years. And again, this is all Revelation 20, verses 1 through 10, Satan bound, the saints reigning with Christ for 1,000 years, and then at the end of those 1,000 years, Satan is unbound, and kind of that final battle before the judgment. And so amillennials to say there's not any actual 1,000 years, that really this it's taking the numerology of Revelation. It just means a lot. It's a really big period of time, and what we're in now, what we've been in since essentially the book of Revelation, up until, well, not the end, but up until that final judgment. In fact, you'll hear the amillennials say that we are in between Revelation 20, verse 6 and 20, verse 7, which is to say we're 1,000 years, and at the end of this period is when Satan and the judgment and all that's going to happen. And so then you have the postmillennial view, which is to say that there's going to be this great and glorious 1,000-year reign of Christ in which Christianity has flourished and spread throughout all the world. It's kind of the most optimistic case, the best case scenario, that Christianity is going to have this golden era in the world we live in, and then at the end of that, Christ is going to come. And so you can see how these things would affect your worldview, right? You say, well, why does this matter? This is really getting into the weeds. Dispensational premillennial people who believe in a tribulation and a rapture and all that, their view is things are going to get worse. And so when they see bad things happen on the news, and they talk about World War III, and that's why they're always looking at these wars and rumors of wars, to use a scriptural term, is to say things are getting really bad. That's how you know we're getting close to this. And the church declining, the church receding, the church being persecuted, those to them are all signs. In fact, John MacArthur, the late John MacArthur, was one of the biggest proponents of dispensational premillennialism. And he famously said, down here we lose, that the church ultimately loses. And so that's that view. Obviously, postmillennial goes the other way. It says down here we do great. And even though things are difficult right now, we're going to have this upward trajectory toward the end of history in which Christianity just does better and better. Amillennial, which is what most in the churches of Christ would call themselves, is much different. It doesn't have an optimistic or pessimistic side to it. It just basically says we're here until he comes back, so let's just get to work. But interestingly, a lot of times, again, especially in the churches of Christ, the amillennial is a very pessimistic amillennial. It's an amillennial that says, I do think things are going to get bad. I think we're going to go backwards. I think that the persecution, the decline, that, again, taking that view of a Revelation as the church against the world, the church against government, the church against power, and all that, that we're always going to be kind of under the boot. We're always going to be the rebellion, the resistance, the underdog, all of those kinds of things. Okay, that's kind of and so you can see where that gets to a pessimistic amillennialism. And then you can have an optimistic amillennialism, which is to say, okay, it's not going to be as great as the postmillennials say, but I expect the gospel to bear fruit. I expect the church to grow. I expect it to spread to all nations and all of those kinds of things, and to be received where it goes, even if it meets persecution. But eventually it will, that seed will grow and it will take root, and the glory of the Lord will be throughout the earth. And so, not that it matters that much in the grand scheme of things. I am an optimistic amillennial, not postmillennial. I think they're a little too optimistic, but I do think we can say that there is going to be a bright future ahead for the church. And so I'm going to pause to take a breath right there. We've covered a lot of that really fast. Those of you that are watching, be sure to click like, whether you're here on Facebook or YouTube. That always helps us with the algorithm, so just reach down there and tap that button. But if you have any comments or questions, things you'd like to see covered, as I said, I don't know if this will be 3, 4, 5 weeks, something like that. And I don't know that I'll be live for all of them. So here is your chance to throw a comment or a question out there if you would like to, and I'll try to get to it here at the end of the stream. We've got a little bit more to get through on this one. I do tend to go pretty fast through these things, and I realize sometimes it's a little too fast, so catching my breath here for just a second. And again, thanks to everyone who's tuning in, whether you're catching it live or catching it later on. It's good to see everyone here. So moving on from the millennial views and again, this is at the heart of these interpretive battles, is when was it written? There is the early view, 64 to 69 AD, that would lend toward the preterist view, that this was about Jerusalem, it was about the temple, it was about things that were going to happen right away. And then there's the later view, which is 95, 96, and a lot of the different views fit in that date better. The historicist view that it was about Roman persecution and all that. At the end of the first century, that makes more sense because the temple, the Jew-Gentile skirmishes, that was kind of a thing of the past, and so it's looking ahead to the things that were to come. And then, of course, if you're viewing it as futurist and it's the end of time, well, it doesn't really matter to you then where it was written, but I believe most of those would still fall in the 95, 96 AD camp. A lot of times with dates of books of the Bible, it just doesn't matter that much. It can be a little bit helpful, but it's not zeroing in on it doesn't matter that much. With Revelation, and I've heard a teacher say, yeah, I don't really fixate on that. You need to, because you don't know what the book is talking about if you're not sure when it was written and what it was addressing. It's like the difference between reading something and saying it's talking about the war, and you're reading it in, 1992 in Desert Storm, or you're reading it in 44 and it's World War II. I mean, it's just totally different worlds that's coming from. Well, it's very similar here. You've got to know what the context is, what we're talking about. So with that, the against or for the later date, Irenaeus is usually the weapon that is pulled out for to make the case for that, where he wrote, "We will not, however, incur the risk of pronouncing positively as to the name of Antichrist, for if it were necessary that his name should be distinctly revealed in this present time, it would have been announced by him who beheld the apocalyptic vision. For," and this is where it gets confusing a little bit, "it was seen not very long time since, but almost in our day, towards the end of Domitian's reign." That, again, he's pointing toward John, Revelation, in the broader context of that quote. The question is, was he talking about John and the Revelation, that he saw this and that this all took place in Domitian's reign, which was in the 90s AD, or the Antichrist, or what necessarily were we talking about there? It's not clear, but that is the quote that's usually leaned on to say it was the later date. Well, as I said, I believe Revelation held the earlier date, and so I'm going to go over the evidence for that. And I think it's mostly the text itself. I think we can dispute Irenaeus. He got some details wrong. He seemed to think that Jesus lived to the age of 50, and so always take what he says with a grain of salt, even if he was saying that John wrote in 90 AD. We have some other contemporary things, a Syriac New Testament, I believe, that dated Revelation in the earlier date. But as I said, in the text itself, I think we have enough evidence to go on to say that Revelation was written in the 60s, and therefore, Again, why does this matter so much? Because it tells us what the book is talking about. And when you understand this, it does start to unlock the book a lot, I believe. Revelation 11, 1 and 2 in the New American Standard says, "Then there was given me a measuring rod like a staff, and someone said, 'Get up and measure the temple of God and the altar and those who worship in it. Leave out the court which is outside the temple, and do not measure it, for it has been given to the nations, and they will tread underfoot the holy city for 42 months. Interesting that he said the temple of God there, measuring the temple of God, and you could say, well, it was a figurative temple, it was the temple in heaven. I don't know. It's talking about the temple and the holy city. By 96 AD, there was no temple left in the holy city. It was demolished in 70 AD, which would point toward that 65 to 68 date of writing. And so, not only that, but you can point back to Jesus' own words here in Luke 21, 20 through 24, or 20, and then we'll jump ahead to 24. "But when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then recognize that her desolation is near. And they will fall by the edge of the sword and will be led captive into all the nations, and Jerusalem will be trampled underfoot by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled." This is in that passage where he's saying, hey, there's not going to be one stone left on another about the temple complex, and the apostles are asking him, when is this going to happen? What are going to be the signs of these things? He says, when Jerusalem's surrounded by armies, and it's going to be trampled underfoot by the Gentiles. Well, what did we just see in Revelation 11, 1 and 2? It's going to be tread underfoot the holy city for 42 months. Well, who was going to do that? Well, it was going to be the Romans, the Gentiles. And so, again, I think that's a pretty good case there. You also have Revelation 11, verse 8. It says, "Their dead bodies will lie in the street of the great city, which is mystically called Sodom, and where also their Lord was crucified." A lot of times we kind of naturally assume when it talks about Babylon in the book of Revelation that that's about Rome, the big bad empire, and therefore that must be Babylon. Yet Sodom and Egypt here, two other bad guy examples you can draw on in the text, they are very clearly talking about Jerusalem. And so I think that is a necessary thing for us to take in as well, that the bad city he's talking about here, where the Lord was crucified, is Jerusalem, and they're called Sodom and Egypt. And I believe we'll get into this in our textual study at some point over the next few weeks, that Babylon itself in the book of Revelation was Jerusalem, for all the wickedness that it had taken on in that time. So, again, you've got a reference to the city where the Lord is crucified. Revelation 1:1, you go right back to the start of the book. This in itself, I think, is pretty solid evidence. "The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave to him to show to his bondservants the things which must soon take place, and he sent and communicated by his angel to his bondservant John." When he says things that must soon take place, you're looking at it as like over the next few years. For the preterist 70 AD destruction of Jerusalem view, you're looking at it for the next couple hundred years for the historicist Roman Empire view, or you're looking at it for 2,000 plus years with not 2,000 plus, but 2,000 at the very least years for the futurist view to say that these things which must soon take place. And of course, people would say, well, with God, a year or days like 1,000 years and so forth. I think he was being literal when he said must soon take place, because number one, his audience was those people, the 7 churches of Asia. He's talking to them about the persecution which they were undergoing from the synagogue of Satan and from false teachers and people leading them astray. And he's telling them, hey, relief is coming. Well, what kind of relief was offered to them in the near future? Because that also tells us it wasn't written directly to us. When we get into that, okay, well, this is happening over in Russia and this is happening in the Middle East, that's what, this is what Revelation is talking about. We're saying this book has not been relevant for 2,000 years, and now it starts being relevant. To people, it wasn't, it was not to the 7 churches, but to us. It is relevant to us, but it was not directly to us. It's to them about things which must soon take place. I think that's way more literal than sometimes we give it credit for. Continuing on in that chapter, one of the points of contention on this is Revelation 1:7, where it says, "Even those who pierced him and all the tribes of the earth will mourn over him. So it is to be. Amen." So the question is that Jesus, he's going to be seen on the clouds, and we think this is his final return. I don't believe it is. I believe it is his ascension unto heaven, as we're going to see here in just a second, but it's also something he pointed to in the Gospels to say it was going to happen, because what's key here is in Revelation 1:7, see there in the middle of that sentence where it says, even those who pierced him. That is the scribes, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the leaders of that day. They're going to see this coming in the clouds that makes this clear. And so how did that happen? He didn't have the final return there in Jerusalem in 70 AD, so how did they see him coming on the clouds? We have to go back, and this is one of the keys to Revelation, is it's referencing the Old Testament a lot. If you're going to get it, you have to go back to the Old Testament and do all the source documents, all the source quotes where they're coming from, and see what it had to say. So in Daniel 7, Daniel says, I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, one like a son of man was coming, and he came up to the Ancient of Days, and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom, that all the peoples, nations, and men of every language might serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which will not pass away, and his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed. So the Son of Man, obviously that's Jesus, to the Ancient of Days. Jesus, behold, with the clouds of heaven, one is coming. So coming on the clouds, the Son of Man, this is his ascension to heaven to receive the kingdom which will not pass away. Well, Daniel's already talked about that kingdom, and that the nations are going to serve him. This, to me, is where you start getting into my point earlier of how Revelation judges how we see the world today. Do we see Jesus as kind of, again, him against the world, the church against the world, or do we view this as this all belongs to him and we're just in the process of putting his name tag on it? And that optimism, that positive vision of, hey, the nations, and the nations matter. This is another important thing, that it's a key word in Revelation. The nations are a part of this. And so when we talk about government, when we talk about politics, these things come to pass here. But that is in Daniel 7, when it talks about Jesus coming on the clouds, that's his ascension to power, and really the finality of what you see at the end of the book of Revelation, the marriage feast of the Lamb with the church, and the rejection of the former bride, and so there's a lot to get into there down the road. Having said that, Jesus himself in Luke 21, he said, Then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. That's that same passage we talked about earlier about Jerusalem and its desolation, trampled underfoot by the Gentiles. They will see the Son of Man come in a cloud with power and great glory. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all things take place. So Daniel said that Jesus is going to ascend to heaven to receive the nations, receive his kingdom. What did Jesus say right before he ascended? All authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. And so that is, again, it's in this first century time period these things happen. And I think the finality of that is making it clear to everybody there is no more old system. There's no more old law system. The temple is destroyed. And he said, this generation will not pass away until all things take place, which takes us all the way back to Revelation 1:7, where he said that those who pierced him are going to see him coming on the clouds. And so, again, it all kind of fits in with these Old Testament texts and Jesus' quotes himself and what we have here. So why all of this matters? Again, this gets very technical when we're talking historicist, futurist, preterist, when we're talking premillennial, amillennial, postmillennial, all those things. I've taught on this before, and you can kind of see people's eyes glaze over a little bit. This stuff really matters. The book of Revelation is heavily about our worship and why Jesus is worthy of our worship and do our worship and what will happen with those who won't worship him. And you kind of have that throne scene in heaven and the just powerful beings up there and all that, and all of them bowing down to Jesus and the casting of the crowns and what that means. And that's important stuff. Of course, there's eschatology, the end times, what's going to happen at the end, and that the word rapture is not in this book. That a lot of the looking at the world today and trying to determine, does this mean we're in the end times? You get a much clearer picture of it when you're not trying to do that, and when you understand Revelation a little bit better. The Christology, who Jesus is. One of the biggest problems in Christianity today is we don't know who Jesus is, and you'll see people say stuff like, well, it turns out the lion was actually a lamb. He's both of those things. And a lot of times you'll see the Sermon on the Mount and the meek and lowly Jesus, which is absolutely there, basically emphasized at the expense of every other representation, manifestation of Jesus, almost like the cleansing of the temple was a bad day, and you got the Old Testament God, New Testament God thing. Revelation puts us right on that. Revelation, he's got a sword coming out of his mouth. He's got eyes like fire. You've got this powerful view of Jesus, who's also the Lamb, whose robe is dipped in blood, and the Lamb that was slain. And so we always want to have like the really, really tough Jesus or the wimpy lay down and just let everybody be Jesus. Revelation gives us the best picture of Jesus, I think, outside of the Gospels, and it kind of completes what sometimes we miss when we just focus on the Gospels. Yeah, the hard-nosed, difficult, exacting Jesus is there just as much as the meek and lowly Jesus, and you need all sides of Jesus. We don't get to pick, and Revelation, again, centers us on that, and so we're going to look at that here in the next few weeks as we go over this book. And then Old Testament prophecy, as I said, this book is just swimming in Old Testament. It's all throughout. It's a really important factor in what happens in the book of Revelation, and so it helps you understand some of those really weird things that Daniel talks about, the weeks and how many weeks things are going to happen and what they're going to see at the end of those weeks. Some of the things Ezekiel sees, some of the things Isaiah sees. Even in the Psalms, you've got all these prophecies and Zechariah and so many Old Testament things that we just look at and go, I don't really know what to do with that. It falls into place pretty well when you view Revelation the right way. But then the New Testament itself makes a lot more sense. The difficult passages in the New Testament, I believe, such as the man of lawlessness in 2 Thessalonians 2, Romans 9 through 11 about the fullness of the Gentiles coming in and then all Israel will be saved and things like that, I think is cleared up by Revelation, Matthew 24, and where people get the tribulation and the rapture, and one will be there and one won't be there and things like that. When you understand Revelation properly, things like that really make more sense, but also the Jew-Gentile relationships in the New Testament, that is such a challenging thing. The book of Acts, things like that, just fall into place so much better when you understand Revelation as kind of that final piece of the puzzle that helps put other things together. And then, as I said, your political worldview. One of the things that frustrates me about when people talk about the book of Revelation is, well, Jesus wins in the end. Yeah, he wins in the end, but he's winning right now. He wins immediately in the book of Revelation, and it's not just that he's reigning right now, it's that he and the saints are reigning right now. That he already won, and we're winning with him. We're in the process of completing that victory. And so it's one of those just kind of, well, let's just put it all off until the final judgment. Jesus wins in the end. Okay, but what about now? Or it's just Babylon the Great is government, and we're always going to be persecuted in this world, and the church is never going to get ahead. I don't really believe that, that God will keep score in the end. No, God's keeping score right now. And so when you understand Revelation, as Lord willing, we're going to try and do a little bit better here in the few weeks that we do this overview, I hope you come out with a stronger understanding of it, that it's not your roadmap to understanding the geopolitical climate of the world today, but it's also not just buckle up, things are going to be real bad, but then when we die, everything gets better. I think it helps us a lot. It gives me a lot of comfort, honestly, in a very tumultuous world, in a very difficult world, a world where Christianity seems to be dealing with a bit of a decline right now. Knowing Revelation better has given me a great deal of comfort. And so I think there's just a lot in this world that it can help us with, and it's something that we need to spend more time on getting it right. Again, like I said, some people will just look at it and go, Jesus wins in the end, or as far as what happens with the millennium, people say, well, I'm a pan-millennial. It all pans out in the end. And it's like, yeah, okay, that's kind of funny. But it helps a lot better to have something solid to hold on to say, here's what God is doing in the world, as he showed us all the way back in 70 AD with the temple, with Jerusalem, with those that persecuted him and persecuted his church, that he's keeping score. And it's not this meek and lowly, wimpy Jesus. It's King of Kings, Lord of Lords, and every knee needs to bow. And yeah, it really centers us where we need to be on so many of those issues. So that's kind of our intro overview for this week. Lord willing, I'll be back next week. I don't think I'll be live because I think I'm going to be not at my desk at the very least. And so it will be up on the YouTube channel. It will be up on the Church Reset podcast feed. As always, it's pretty hard to sit and watch these 30 minutes at a time. If you want to catch it on the go, subscribe to the Church Reset feed, and you'll just get it. You can listen to it wherever you want. And yeah, that's about all I have to plug for now. So if you're watching, as always, be sure to hit like, and I will talk to you guys on the next one.